There is a moment somewhere in the deep of the night when the world is completely still. The streets are empty. The sounds of the day have long since faded. The people you love are asleep beside you or in the next room, breathing slowly, undisturbed. And yet you are awake, not gently awake, not the soft half-waking of someone who simply needs to turn over and find comfort again. No, you are fully, completely, inexplicably awake. And the clock on the wall or the phone on your nightstand reads somewhere between 2:30 and 3:15 in the morning. If this has happened to you once, you may have dismissed it. If it has happened to you a handful of times, you may have called it stress or a bad week or too much coffee. But if it happens to you with a regularity that begins to feel like clockwork, if there is something almost mechanical about the way your eyes open at that hour, as if something inside you has set an alarm you never agreed to, then it is asking you a question. And the question is not simply, why can't I sleep? The deeper question is, what does the body know that the mind has not yet had the courage to face, to answer that question? Honestly, we must be willing to go somewhere that most conversations about sleep do not go. We must be willing to look not just at the symptoms, but at the architecture beneath the symptoms. Because when we understand what is actually happening inside the body, at 3 o'clock in the morning, something remarkable becomes possible. We stop seeing wakefulness as a malfunction, and we begin to see it as information. Let us begin with the body itself. Let us begin with what the ancient traditions knew and what modern science is slowly beginning to confirm. The human body operates according to a rhythm that is far older than civilization. Long before we had clocks to tell us the time, long before we had words for the organs inside us, the body already had its own language, a language of cycles and functions, of activity and rest, of giving and releasing. In Chinese medicine, this language has been mapped for thousands of years in what is called the organ clock. It is a 24-hour wheel, each segment of which corresponds to a different organ system. And during each segment, that organ is said to be at the height of its activity. Now, I want you to listen carefully to what happens on that wheel between 1 and 3 in the morning. That 2-hour window from 1 a.m. to 3 a.m. is assigned to the liver's hour, the hour during which this organ, quietly, without your conscious knowledge or permission, is doing some of the most important work it does in the entire day. And if you consistently wake during that window, if your eyes open at 2:47 or 3:03 with a frequency that no longer feels like coincidence, the ancient tradition is pointing directly at you and saying your liver is speaking. The question is whether you are willing to listen. But before we talk about what the liver is saying, let us make sure we understand what the liver actually is. Because most people, if you ask them about the liver, will say something vague. It processes alcohol. It does something with toxins. It is somewhere on the right side of the body. And while these things are true, they are enormously incomplete. The liver is not simply a detox organ. The liver is one of the most complex, most multitasking, most extraordinary organs in the human body. It performs over 500 distinct functions. Let that number sit with you for a moment. 500. It filters the blood. It produces bile to break down fats. It regulates blood sugar by storing and releasing glucose. It synthesizes proteins, including the ones that allow your blood to clot It metabolizes hormones, including the stress hormones that govern how you feel when you are anxious, reactive, overwhelmed. It converts toxins, not just from alcohol or poor diet, but also the chemical byproducts of emotional stress into substances that can be safely eliminated from the body. It is, in every meaningful sense, one of the body's great central processors, and it does the majority of this work at night, when the body is horizontal, when blood flow to the liver increases, when the digestive system has quieted, and when the liver finally has the resources it needs to clean house. Now, here is the critical thing. The liver is extraordinarily sensitive, not just to what you eat and drink, but to how you live, to the quality of the air around you, the quality of the food inside you, and the quality of the emotional environment you carry. In Chinese medicine, the liver is specifically associated with the emotion of anger, not anger in the simple, explosive sense of the word, but anger in its broader family: frustration, resentment, suppressed irritation, the low-grade simmering of feelings that were never expressed, conflicts that were never resolved, words that were swallowed instead of spoken. Think about that for a moment. Think about the last time you went to bed with something unresolved sitting in your chest, a conversation that did not go the way you needed it to, a situation at work that felt unfair and that you had no power to change, a feeling of being overlooked or undervalued or misunderstood, and choosing, in the way that most of us choose most of the time, to push that feeling down and get on with the day. The liver, according to this ancient map of the body, is where those unexpressed emotions are held. And when the liver is already burdened, when it is already working overtime to process what you ate and drank and were exposed to throughout the day, the addition of that emotional weight can push it past its threshold. And so at 1 a.m., at 2 a.m., at 3 a.m., the liver is doing its work. And if the liver is strained, if it is inflamed, if it is congested, if it is carrying more than it can comfortably process, that strain expresses itself as a signal to the nervous system. And the nervous system, receiving that signal, pulls you out of sleep. Not because something is wrong with your sleep, but because something is asking for your attention. And sleep is the only moment quiet enough for that asking to be heard. Now, let us bring the science into this conversation, because I want you to understand that what the ancient tradition is describing is not mystical. It is biological. It is chemical. It is measurable. Modern science confirms that the liver is indeed most active during the night. Research into the body's circadian rhythm, its internal 24-hour clock, has shown that the liver has its own peripheral clock, distinct from the master clock in the brain. And this peripheral clock governs the timing of the liver's metabolic functions. Certain liver enzymes peak at specific hours of the night. The production of certain proteins, the clearing of certain metabolic waste products, the regulation of blood sugar, all of these are timed processes, and many of them cluster in the hours between midnight and 3 in the morning. And we know that when the liver is under stress from excess sugar, from alcohol, from environmental toxins, from chronic inflammation, from the metabolic dysregulation that comes with long-term elevated cortisol, it does not simply work a little harder and manage. It begins to struggle, and that struggle is not silent. It sends signals through the autonomic nervous system. It can trigger subtle fluctuations in blood sugar that activate the stress response. It can influence the production of neurotransmitters including serotonin, much of which is produced in the gut and liver pathways and which plays a direct role in your mood, your anxiety, and your ability to rest. So when we say the liver is speaking, we are not speaking poetically. We are speaking literally. The liver communicates with the brain. The liver communicates with the nervous system. And if the liver is under enough strain, that communication can take the form of a 3 a.m. awakening that feels from the inside, like coming up gasping from a dream you cannot quite remember, but I want to go deeper still, because the question of why the liver might be strained is itself worth examining carefully. And when we examine it carefully, we find something that most people do not expect to find. We find that the primary stressor of the modern liver is not the obvious one. It is not alcohol, though alcohol is certainly destructive. It is not junk food, though poor diet certainly plays a role. The primary stressor of the modern liver is something far more pervasive, far more socially acceptable, and far harder to simply decide to stop. It is the pace of the life we are living. We live in an era of extraordinary acceleration. The demands on our attention, our energy, our emotional resources are unlike anything that previous generations experienced at this scale. We are connected to our work at every hour. We are processing more information in a single day than our grandparents processed in a month. We are making more decisions, navigating more complexity, absorbing more emotional content through news, through social media, through the relentless scroll of other people's lives than the human nervous system was ever designed to absorb without consequence. And none of that complexity, none of that emotional charge, none of that cortisol and adrenaline that the body produces in response to a day of constant stimulation, none of it simply disappears when you close your laptop or put down your phone. It goes somewhere, and part of where it goes is into the liver, because the liver is responsible for metabolizing cortisol. The liver is responsible for breaking down the stress hormone that your body produces in response to everything that feels urgent, threatening, overwhelming, or unresolved. And if those hormones are being produced faster than the liver can process them, if the system is chronically overwhelmed, then the liver is perpetually behind. It is always catching up. And at 2 a.m, in the middle of its prime working hours, you will feel the consequences of that backlog. I have spoken with many people over the years who describe the same experience. They go to bed feeling genuinely exhausted. They fall asleep without difficulty, and then reliably, somewhere around 3 a.m, they are awake. And what is remarkable is what they describe in that wakefulness. It is not peace. It is not the gentle drifting of someone who simply woke up a little early. It is a particular kind of agitation, a low current of anxiety that has no specific object, a restlessness of the mind that does not attach to any single worry but seems to vibrate at some deeper frequency, a feeling sometimes of heaviness in the right side of the body, a slight bitterness at the back of the throat, a sense that the body is working, processing, grinding through something, and has temporarily pulled consciousness up to the surface in the process. These are not imagined sensations. These are the body communicating. And what the body is communicating in that moment is exactly what the ancient tradition described. The liver is doing its work, and its work is hard, and you are carrying more than you know. Now, what do we do with this information? Because information without direction is just a weight. And I do not want to give you something that makes you feel worse about your 3 a.m. waking. I want to give you something that makes you understand it differently. Because when you understand it differently, your relationship to it changes. And when your relationship to it changes, something in the body relaxes. The first thing to understand is this: the liver responds to everything, not just to what you eat and drink, but to when you eat and drink it, to how much rest you give the body, to the quality of the emotional environment you create, internally and externally. The liver is not separate from your psychology. It is embedded in it. Every time you hold back anger that needed to be expressed, every time you absorb someone else's stress without a way to release it, every time you push through exhaustion instead of resting, every time you eat a meal in a hurry while staring at a screen, or drink a glass of wine to take the edge off a day that has left you feeling jagged, you are making a deposit into the liver's account. And at some point, the account is full and the body asks you to make a withdrawal. The second thing to understand is that the liver has an extraordinary capacity for regeneration. Of all the organs in the body, the liver is perhaps the most capable of healing itself given the right conditions. It can regenerate damaged tissue. It can restore its function. It can rebalance what has been disrupted, but it requires something from you in order to do so. It requires that you stop adding to the burden while it is trying to recover. It requires consistency, not perfection, but a sustained, patient shift in the direction of less toxin, less stress, less suppression, less pushing through. And here is something that very few people consider when they think about the liver. The liver benefits enormously from emotional honesty, from the expression in safe and appropriate ways of the feelings that have been stored. This is not therapy speak. This is physiology. When we suppress emotion, the body does not simply ignore what is being suppressed. It processes it chemically. The chemical byproducts of suppressed emotion are real. They are measurable, and they are part of what the liver must metabolize. So every conversation you have that allows something true to be said, every moment of genuine expression rather than performance, every instance of saying, I am not okay when you are not okay, these are not just good for your relationships. They are good for your liver. They are, in the most literal sense, a form of medicine. And there is something else, something simpler and perhaps harder than all of this. The liver needs the night. It needs the hours between 10 in the evening and 2 in the morning to be hours of actual rest, not stimulation. When you are awake past midnight, scrolling, watching, consuming, when you are giving your liver a late meal to process or a glass of alcohol to break down, you are robbing it of the early part of its working window. And so by the time 3 a.m. arrives, the liver is in the middle of a task that ideally should have been half finished by now. And the signal it sends to the nervous system is louder than it needs to be. This is not about being rigid. This is not about imposing rules on yourself that create more stress than they relieve. This is about understanding us with real compassion for the body you are living in, that the body has a timing, it has a rhythm. And when we work with that rhythm, when we honor the hours that were designed for rest by actually resting, during them, the liver can do what it is designed to do, quietly, effectively, without waking you up to announce that it is struggling. There is a word I want to offer you, and it is a word that the ancient traditions used in many different forms. in many different languages. Nourishment, the liver, is asking to be nourished, not fed, nourished. There is a difference. Feeding is simply filling. Nourishment is giving the body what it genuinely needs and recognizing that what it genuinely needs is not only food, it is also silence. It is also rest. It is also the permission to feel what is real. It is also the willingness to slow down, not as a sign of weakness, but as an act of profound intelligence. Because the body is not your enemy. The 3 a.m. waking is not your enemy. The liver working too hard in the middle of the night is not your enemy. They are all, every one of them, expressions of a system that is trying to maintain itself in conditions that are, if we are honest, extraordinarily challenging. The body is doing everything it can to keep you well. And when it wakes you at 3 in the morning, it is not punishing you. It is asking you quietly, insistently, in the only language it has available at that hour to pay attention. So the first key, the first answer to the question of why some people wake at 3 in the morning is this: the liver is speaking, and what it is saying is layered. It is saying something about diet, something about toxins, something about the pace of your life, something about the emotion you have been storing rather than expressing. It is saying that the burden it is carrying has become heavier than the night can hold, and it is inviting you, not demanding, not condemning, but inviting to begin, making it lighter. Not tomorrow, not after the next project is finished, not when life settles down, because life, as you know, does not settle down on its own. It settles down when you decide to settle it, one breath at a time, one meal at a time, one honest conversation at a time, one night of genuine rest at a time. The journey of understanding your body begins here, in this quiet, uncomfortable, revealing moment at 3 in the morning, in the willingness to ask, not what is wrong with me, but rather, what is my body trying to tell me? The body never lies. The only question is whether you are quiet enough to hear it.